Thank you, Eva, and thank you for allowing me to come today. The list of outdated gadgets that I own is unfortunately very long, but I do own several copies of the Microsoft Zune, for example. If anyone remembers that, that was a music player Microsoft thought was going to be a success. I bought it, and I think not that many other people did, but that's history now. Thank you for allowing me to come today. This is a really important topic, a really interesting one, and of course one that interests Facebook greatly. We are here, we're discussing platforms, potential regulation of platforms, a potential European approach, and those are really, really key. I want to say that the digital single market that we are, all part of these days are one of the most ambitious and unifying digital policy projects ever undertaken. And that is really important. It has created cross-border possibilities, economic opportunities, and has enabled innovation and European businesses to thrive. We should not forget the success that has already been created. For us at Facebook, it has allowed us to make very significant investments across the EU. We have 17 offices in the EU, employing more than 7,000 people. We have built or are in the process of building 4 data centers. We have 2 research centers on artificial intelligence in Paris and Berlin. And we are a platform that enables 18 million European SMEs to grow their business across borders. Now, there are some issues that I think we as a platform that we are equipped to basically solve on our own. And there are also some issues that government needs to deal with. However, most of the biggest challenges we have these days actually lie in the middle. We need to work together to deal with those. It's a process that I think has already started, but we need to continue and do more. And as I think also Werner alluded to, it's this middle part, in the middle between business and industry, that most of the issues that we deal with are, and I think it's especially important in the tech field. As Werner also mentioned, tech moves fast, so we need to be flexible. Platforms come in all shapes. Some platforms connect retailers to consumers, others help people get from A to B, and still others connect people so they can communicate. So flexibility here is key. And as Werner also said, platforms come in all sizes. Some are big, some are small, some are local, some are global. So whatever solutions we come up to need to be able to scale from the smallest to the biggest. We have already been working together in the EU, and there's actually a history of projects that have been ongoing. I remember in the early zeros, we started to work together on issues like child safety. Self-regulation was created on child safety. A couple of years ago, we worked together on a code of conduct on hate speech to improve in that field. The EU Internet Forum was created to deal with terrorism. And recently, a code on misinformation has been signed with the European Commission by a number of platforms. And these are just a number of examples of places where we work together to try to solve some of these issues. And that's important because we need to move fast and deal with them. Some of them arise very quickly. Solutions need to be found quickly and implemented quickly. And I think the hard truth is that when you, like Facebook does, connect 2 billion people, you will see a lot of beautiful things that people create in this world. But unfortunately, you will also see some of the ugliness of humanity. And we want Facebook to be a place where people can freely debate different points of view, but we also want it to be a place where people can feel safe. This is not an easy balance to strike. And it's why for many years we've had community standards that explain what stays up and what comes down on Facebook. We don't want hate, we don't want terror, propaganda, incitement of violence, or bullying on our platform. However, we've not been perfect, and we needed to learn from those that were involved and saw the consequences when something went wrong. And we've interacted with authorities in Europe, with the EU institutions, with NGOs and others, to learn and improve and become better and sometimes faster at dealing with these issues. We learned from the 2016 US presidential elections that we need to do more to protect elections and to deal with interference and fake news. We learned from the Cambridge Analytica case to step up security and privacy as well, and we've worked diligently on that ever since. And now, as our CEO has said, we're now taking a much broader view of the responsibilities we have to deal with these issues. To live up to that, we've hired more than 20,000 people working in the area of safety and security. That includes content reviewers, system engineers, security experts, and others that review more than 2 million pieces of content every day. So we're doing a lot of different things. Take, for example, the way we crack down on fake accounts to combat which is one of the key things, actually, to combating misinformation. People appear with another personality, a fake personality, trying to convince people of a view that's not truthful. We use artificial intelligence to do that, making us able to take down 98% of fake accounts before they are ever reported to us. And we are currently blocking more than 1 million fake accounts at the point of creation every day. Or the work we've done on removing terrorist content on the platform. 99% of terrorist content is removed by artificial intelligence before it ever shows up on the platform. And we have 200 people working around the clock on counterterrorism measures. We invested in third-party fact-checking to help address the issues of fake news. However, as I said, this is not something we think one company can solve on its own. So let's try to look at the different ways of legislating and dealing with some of the issues I just mentioned. And we can sort of look at the traditional way of legislation, call it state regulation, whatever name you want for it. But this classical model is one where the state establishes a regulatory body in law that, excuse me, a regulatory body in law who is given formal powers to enforce statutory requirements on industry and levy sanctions. This is, for example, how broadcast regulation works. This has the advantage of being highly credible, at least where the regulator is seen as doing a good job, but it may not be sufficiently flexible or scalable. The sheer scale of content being shared over internet platforms means that it can be very hard to apply such a traditional model where a state body manages all of this. There are also in principle objections to the notion of a state body having so much control over speech on the internet in many countries. So this approach usually works best when the scope of activities are very narrow and well defined. Second approach, which we have followed now for a number of years, is the approach of self-regulation. Here the model is for industries to adopt their own self-regulatory codes and enforcement bodies. These can be very flexible and scalable because they are developed by experts in the relevant sector. Some of them are seen as highly credible to the point where people don't realize that they are actually self-regulatory rather than formal regulatory structures. But others are more open to criticism as being insufficiently robust and effective. So the last model to consider is the model where government and industry work together on co-regulatory schemes. Expert industry input can help ensure that the scheme is flexible and effective at dealing with particular challenges, while having the involvement of a government body in managing and enforcing the scheme can help it be credible. And this is the direction I think we have to take on these issues. And I'll mention a few examples where I think we need to do more to talk about the issues. I mentioned before the EU Internet Forum on counterterrorism efforts, and I think the work that went on in that forum for a number of years actually led to a much better proposal coming out of the European Commission on counterterrorism online that was released a couple of months ago. So the very strong collaboration between industry and governments in something like the EU Forum leads to better regulatory results, whether they in this case are pure regulation or in some other cases maybe more co-regulatory in nature. But sometimes there are so difficult questions to deal with that we need to discuss more. And I'll mention an example from Ireland that recently had a referendum on reproductive rights. And in Ireland, it wasn't clear from Irish law who could actually advertise online in such a situation. Was it just Irish people? Was it just people living in Ireland? Was it everybody? It was unclear. And we had to make our own decisions and say, actually, we think it's probably best that this is only for people in Ireland to place advertising online in relation to this referendum. And there were very strong forces, in particular in the United States, that were very eager to intervene in the referendum in that country. And that to me is an example where making us make decisions like this is not the right approach. We took the decision because we had to, but it didn't feel like a decision that was right for us to make. In other countries like my own, Denmark, for example, I know that Danish political parties put ads in the paper in Sweden, for example, to influence Swedish politics, or maybe also Danish politics. But they put them in papers in countries next to them, and that's perfectly acceptable. So where are the borders here? Where are the boundaries? How should this work? And then my last example is just the issue of hate speech again. I think here it's quite clear that the boundary between hate speech and free speech are not very clearly defined. And in many situations, there's a lot of work that needs to be done together to define that border clearer. And I don't think it's something that should be left just to industry. We have recently, as some of you might have heard, entered into a project with President Macron in France to establish better ways of talking about regulation, moving us beyond either regulation or self-regulation, but into a co-regulation territory. And hopefully we'll see new and more interesting and better content regulation come out of that. We hope to do the same here in Brussels with the EU, with members of the European Parliament and others. And with that, I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.